Welcome back to my channel. Delighted to say I've got Ipswich MP, Conservative MP, Tom Hunt back on the channel. Tom, how are you?
I'm very good. Happy Easter. Happy Easter for yesterday.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about this tweet that you put out. They got a really major reaction. For those that haven't seen it, and I will bring it up in a second on the screen, can you just explain what you said?
Well, it all follows what happened at Pimlico Academy when we heard that, you know, the headmaster had been forced to take down the Union flag at Pimlico Academy because of protest. And actually this followed last September, the Union flag, I understand, actually being burned. I think that's what I heard happened at Pimlico Academy. So I looked at this and I was quite disturbed by it. And probably what I was most disturbed by was the fact that, we'd given in. The school had kind of given in to the kind of woke mob. And I don't think that's a very good message to send out at a national level. So, I've got I understand, some people who are very patriotic and do like the Union flag, not all of them agree with what I've said in my tweet, because they say, well, it shouldn't be compulsory. And they also say that, this is sort of moving more to America, where we're a bit more kind of in your face with patriotism and the flag. And, maybe if you'd spoken to me about 6 or 7 years ago, I would have had some sympathy with that argument. But really what we've seen over the last year or so is so much of what we care about and so much of what we hold dear really coming under assault. Our history, and it goes right into our education system. The legacies of some of our great historical figures, all of it is under assault. And it's under assault from a very determined enemy who is really not going to rest until they get to a point where the majority of people in this country feel ashamed to be British. So I think that the time has come to be much more muscular and robust in confronting this group of people. And I think, what's more important than our schools? This is our young people. I think our young people should be educated and brought up to be proud in their country, to understand what the Union flag represents. And, if there's some kind of misconception about the Union flag and what it represents, then, perhaps we need to explain to those peoples why they're wrong and what the Union flag represents and why flying it is important. And if there's any teachers who have those similar misconceptions, then we should do exactly the same thing. So it was quite a robust tweet that I put out, but I think I just really don't like the way that there's this perception that we've given in, and we've given in to this woke mob minority. We've got to stand up to them, and we've got to be more robust in doing so. And what better way to say that flag is going back up? And you know what? It's going to be compulsory for it to go back up and up and down the country. We want to see the Union flag flying outside all schools.
Yeah, and Tom, outside the sort of Twitter metropolitan bubble, when you look at the research on this, there's a clear majority of Brits have a positive opinion of those who fly our country's flag. And yet, what do you make of sort of, and I'm sorry to say, it does tend to be left-wingers who seem to get triggered by their own country's flag, including we've seen recently when it appears on products in supermarkets, even people get upset. What do you think that says?
Well, a lot of these people were entirely supportive and comfortable about the EU flag flying, which, let's be honest, isn't even a country. It's an artificial bureaucratic entity. And they're very happy for that to be flying all over the place. But there seems to be something so wrong about the Union flag, and I put this tweet out, and it was a bit of a robust tweet. I did think it was probably going to get a bit of traction, but the amount of, I think I've got 7,500, comments on Twitter, and the vast majority of them were opposed to the idea, which goes to show that Twitter really, it is so unrepresentative of, and I think the reality is, if you post something on Twitter and it's unpopular, then the chances are that it's probably actually where the majority of the country are outside of Twitter. But and then my local paper actually, ran a poll on it. Unfortunately, what happens is that the left wing just get hold of this poll and they start sharing it in all their groups to try and, and I've also had a load of SNP people from all over Scotland now descending on my Facebook page, because the National, which is a Scottish newspaper which is pro SNP, wrote it up and were, sort of suggesting that I wanted to, force the Union flag to be flown all over Scotland, and then all of these SNP people were sort of posting abuse on my page as well. So I mean, these individuals. I mean, if I'm triggering the woke lot, then I'm probably in the right place. So this will continue, and there'll be a letter from a common sense group of MPs. We are going to write a letter to the Secretary of State for Education about this. We have had some success with Oliver Dowden when it comes to flying of the flag on all government buildings. That is now, so we're actually, we're pushing hopefully a bit of an open door. There's a momentum behind the whole notion of flying flags and the government stipulating that flags should be flown. So, we've done it for government buildings, let's do it for our schools now.
Now, we've spoken before, Tom, about the BBC licence fee, and something that really incensed people recently was when we saw that sort of sneering from BBC breakfast time presenters when we saw Minister there, Robert Jenrick, with the Union flag behind him. What did you make of that exchange?
I was sadly not that surprised. So I think it's kind of what we've come to expect from senior BBC reporters. They are not connected, they are not in touch with the sort of the common person, man or woman in this country, and their sympathies and their values. So no, they do mock the Union flag. They do try to ridicule people who take pride in it. But they just don't understand why this stuff is important. The flag is important. Nationhood is important. Our pride in Britain is important. It's a fabric of our lives. It connects us together. It binds us together, and it brings unity. And we should be embracing it. But I wasn't surprised by what the BBC said. And I think they've now issued an apology, which was welcome. But we saw it over the whole last night of the proms debacle as well, over BBC decisions, and which were then reverted and U-turned on. But the BBC has become disconnected from the majority of people in this country, and I've said before, I think it's beyond repair. I think it's beyond repair. And I think, at best, we're going to tinker at the edges, maybe make it slightly less bad, but ultimately it's done, as an institution, in my view. And I would, I think we need to move beyond the BBC.
Tom, on my channel, I've been sort of highlighting how the sort of EU's pettiness over some of the response to the UK's success on vaccine. Of course, we've seen legal threats from the EU, threats of a blockade on vaccine exports. They still, by the way, haven't even bothered to ratify the deal. We hear that's eventually going to happen at the end of April. I know that you're a strong Brexiteer. What do you make of the EU's recent behaviour as the UK's raced ahead on the vaccine success?
Well, look, it's the same principle, really, which has been live for the last few years, which is that the European Union are just terrified that Britain is going to be a success after having left the European Union, because of what that means in terms of their whole worldview is proved wrong. Everything they've lived their lives by is proved wrong, and that must be pretty depressing, And the whole principle about, what they're trying to do has been proved to be ineffective. And also it would encourage other countries to maybe look at us and think, well, that's a pretty good way of doing things. Let's go and do that, And the thing is, I know that some of them say that, even if we'd still been an EU member, there was an option for us to have, not had to take part in the EMA, the European Medical Agency's approach. And we could have done it. There was this emergency clause that meant that we could have done what we've done anyway. But ultimately, the key thing here is a principle at the heart of our success, which is the ability to act nimbly, dynamically, quickly, and in accordance with our own national interest. And the reality is that, we're in a position right now where, we've vaccinated virtually, we've offered a vaccine to everyone, virtually everyone over the age of 50. But, my old man, 75, had his second dose a few days ago, which is, and the reality is probably the majority of people who are my dad's age, and sadly in France, Germany and Italy, haven't had one dose, and that's exactly the time that the Kent variant is becoming more prolific in those countries. So, and I take, though obviously I do think this shows the benefits of Brexit. I do think it's, and I'm glad that we're doing so well. To be honest, it is very sad, and if I could be proven wrong on Brexit and thousands of lives be saved in Italy and France and Germany, then I would accept that, of course, because it's very sad to see that decisions have been made that have potentially leading to the lives of thousands of unnecessary deaths. And you look at the kind of comments that Macron's put out about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, this kind of misinformation, I mean, it has done, and it is costing lives. But I think that the way the EU have acted, it shows a kind of paranoia, a kind of insecurity around Brexit, and they are terrified. They are terrified at the prospect of more and more evidence coming to the fore that Brexit was the right decision and we're being a success. And the principle at the heart of why the vaccine rollout has been so successful in Britain, it will manifest itself in different ways in other spheres over the next few years, because it's all connected with the principle that if you leave the EU like we've done, you have greater freedoms to act flexibly, nimbly, dynamically, and in accordance with your national interest. And I think over time, it will be proven that Brexit was the right thing for our country.
Now, Tom, I know you, like me, take a pretty robust stance when it comes to law and order. I've got to ask you, what do you make of these kill the bill protests that we've seen from the far left? Of course, we've seen police officers attacked. We saw police stations smashed up in Bristol. We even saw the torching of police vans. What are you making of all this?
The police and crime bill was coming through Parliament. We were hearing that these were just people who were concerned about peaceful protest. They were just, they didn't want peaceful protest to be banned. But I think actually through their actions and their demonstrations, we are seeing exactly what this bill is about. This bill is not about outlawing peaceful protest. What it is keeping in check these insidious people who are, self-centered, narcissistic, often violent, obsessed with themselves. They want to go out there. They want to cause mass disruption to the lives of the law-abiding majority. They want to dig up lawns in Cambridge. They want to block emergency service vehicles from getting across bridges. They should be exposed for themselves. The Labour Party should be ashamed that it opposed that bill. Jeremy Corbyn, I believe, was at one of these demonstrations. A number of their MPs have been at these demonstrations, and what further proof do we need that sadly the Labour Party of old, the respected party of old, has essentially become a left-wing protest movement? And I think that we need to defend peaceful protest. There's nothing in the bill that I voted for that, in my view, harms peaceful protest, but we've also got to be robust. We cannot have, I mean in London, you go to London and there's times, where, there'll be a massive Extinction Rebellion protest, which just grinds with central London to a halt. And then there'll be another one a few days later. And I'm like, what is going on? Why have you got this endless right to just cause mass disruption to people's lives? And and that kind of aggression to the kill the bill. I mean, a few meters away from a police officer who was killed defending us from a knife wielding terrorist. And they think that's appropriate to put that kind of slogan up. These people really are beneath contempt, a lot of them. And I absolutely support peaceful protest. And if there was anything done to restrict that, because at some point there'll be another left-wing government, and it might well be the case that I want to peacefully protest about some kind of nonsense policy coming out from the government, and that should be protected. Of course it should. But we're not going to be, if me and you disagreed with something a left-wing government was doing, it's entirely conceivable that we'd be out there peacefully protesting. But we're not going to start abusing coppers. We're not going to start attacking coppers. We're not going to start graffitiing statues and blocking ambulances from getting across bridges. That is the difference. That is the difference. That is what this bill is about. And I think people are beginning to see that now. And you know what? A lot of these protesters are their own worst enemy. They are their own worst enemy. And if they honestly think this kind of behaviour endears the majority of the public to their cause, I think they're mistaken, very mistaken.
And finally, Tom, I've been looking at some of the polling. It's pretty disastrous stuff for Keir Starmer's Labour Party. What are the elections looking like on your patch? What's your feeling overall about the national mood at the moment?
Well, I think clearly, we've had, yes, the vaccine rollout has been a success. But I think that it's still kind of midterm. We're in the midst of a pandemic. There's been significant distress caused by that. So I think the fact that we have the lead that we have at the national level is significant. And I locally, I think that we can. Local elections are always difficult when you're in government. And I think we look at the Hartlepool by-election, and we shouldn't forget the fact that it's incredibly rare for the government of the day to make gains in parliamentary by-elections. I mean, Copeland was the last example, really the only example that really stands out to me at the moment, just thinking off the top of my head. So I want us to be realistic, and I want us to not be complacent. But I think there is a chance that we could do really well in these local elections. And how extraordinary would that be? Bearing in mind that we're in the midst of a pandemic and we've been in government for 10 years. I mean, how extraordinary would that be if actually in Ipswich we can make some gains from Labour? And I think that we can. I think that we're working hard to do that. And I think we are seeing in London, unfortunately, that I think most of the people look at Sadiq Khan and think he's a pretty ineffective mayor. But I'm looking at the polling in London; he still seems to be a long way ahead. So we are seeing this realignment. I think since the last general election, I think the realignment is probably just cemented even further. We're really seeing a lot of these seats we won in 2019. Hopefully, what we're going to see is that a lot of those voters are still with us. They're not turning away from us. But unfortunately, it does seem that London is going in the wrong direction. And I don't really know what we can do about that, because I just do think there is this disconnect between London and the rest of the country. And though it's sad to see, the prospect of Sadiq Khan being re-elected, it is what it is.
Indeed. We'll have to see what happens in May. But look, Tom, great to have you back on the channel. Perhaps we'll talk again after the elections and assess what's happening. Yeah. Tom Hunt, thanks for joining me today.
Cheers. Bye.